What do you do when someone else is taking credit for your work at your job? I interviewed a woman on my podcast who told me a story about a project she worked on for months, like 6 to 9 months. And she had a big presentation in front of all the bosses explaining this project and what could happen next and why the company should move forward and all this work she had put in. And so there she was in a conference room at the head of a table with all men sitting there, and she was a black woman presenting this, and the men started asking questions about this big project that she had put all this time into for months, and they were directing all of the questions to the one man who was her direct boss. And he was answering their questions, even though he didn't put together this project. And he had, supervised and, she had checked in with him, but it was her project. And she was expecting him to defer to her, to give her credit, to, let them know that this was her project and she was in charge of it. And he didn't really put in the work for it. But instead, he answered all the questions. And at the end, she was upset. The meeting had adjourned and it was just her and her boss. And he said, "I thought that went great. They approved your project. They're going to move forward. The funding has been allocated. This is the best possible outcome. Why do you seem not happy?" And she said, "Because you were answering all the questions and it seemed like you were taking the credit." And he said, No, that was not my intention. He said, "My intention was to be supportive of you. And I thought I would be supportive of you by, advocating and answering the questions that were directed to me." And she said, "You should have directed those questions to me and let them know that it was me who did all the work and should have answered them." And so by her bringing this up to him, it opened his eyes to something he didn't even realize. Right or wrong, his intention was to support her and not to take credit or block her. But that's what he seemed to be doing, from her eyes especially. And that could have laid the groundwork for others to not recognize what she had really done. And by her bringing this up, her boss never did that again. So sometimes the simplest thing you can do to get credit is to bring it up. And not necessarily in front of everyone. Bring it up to the one person that you think is having the biggest impact on you not getting the credit you deserve.